Hello again. In this section of the presentation, I would like to talk about new media based on electronic networks and on computers. Some of the expectations that were attached to the introduction of new media, and some of the ways in which those expectations played out. So I think what we could say, just like we said in the beginning of the discussion of effects, that tremendous hopes and fears always accompany the introduction of new media. The introduction of electronic networks was especially accompanied by tremendous hopes. The belief was really that new media, electronic media, would have the effect of meaningfully democratizing communicative space and the public sphere. How? Um, these were the expectations. The expectation was that with the possibility for everybody or nearly everybody to become a producer of media content, that this would become decentralized and the role of production would no longer be the exclusive property of large media corporations and people with access to expensive technology, but to anybody with access to a network connection and a computer, for example. A second expectation was that through things like social media that allow for discussion and comment, or even comment forums and discussion boards and these type of media, that open space would be provided for comment and response on events. That is, that public discussion could be opened up in a radically meaningful way. A third expectation was that electronic media would eliminate the power of censorship and of state and other control of media by providing such a variety of sources to information that barriers to information would tend to disappear, or at the very least become less less important. A further expectation was that by allowing for the exchange of messages and comment and various other types of live interaction, that lines of direct contact between citizens and institutions could be open up. And finally, there was the expectation that new communities could be formed through electronic networks, that it provided for the possibility for communication to be open to people, relatively unbounded by barriers of geography, of what country or what part of the world somebody happened to be in, and by barriers of access, whether people are able to get to a particular place or not. Now, in many respects, all of these hopes that are outlined here are consistent with the idea or the ideal that we discussed in the first section of the public sphere. One of the theorists of the public sphere who's been developing and promoting proposals for a kind of rehabilitation of the public sphere so that it can realize its democratic potential is the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas. This is sort of an old photo of Habermas that I've chosen for you here, but I like it. He looks like he's very curious about something. In any case, Habermas, in talking about the public sphere, says that it's the foundation of democratic culture. If we want democratic culture to be able to function, we need to pay attention to the public sphere. And what do we need to emphasize about the public sphere? First of all, that the public sphere should be democratic and it should be inclusive. Everybody should be able to participate in public discussion and in the formation of and criticism of public opinion and public acts. Second, that the public sphere needs to be autonomous from the activity and the control of the state. It is an arena of the publication that is controlled by the public and that acts as the vehicle for influence of the public on institutions that control their conditions of life. Third, that the public sphere is formed and reformed through instances of communication, that when individual members of the society come together to talk about things, and they can come together physically or they can come together virtually, electronically. This is when the public is formed, and then a democratic agenda, public opinion, is forged through these kinds of discussions that happen in the context of the public sphere that is constantly formed and reformed. And finally, another point about the public sphere is that in its ideal state, it does not rely on a restricted group of producers or controllers, like professional journalists or other specialists, such as designers or film directors and so on, but that it is produced out of direct public participation. Well, these expectations, they were optimistic. Have any of the things that have been predicted happen? Some of them have. I think we all know stories by now about the importance of some social media networks like Twitter and WhatsApp and some similar ones in popular protest and the exchange of information during protests that allowed for protests to happen independently of police control. We can probably talk about some other things, so that one of the first big developments that attracted attention in the context that we're looking at now in relation to new media was weblogs, blogs in social media, that this was a vehicle through which anybody could set up a website for information and comment and share it with as many people who wanted to read. By 2013, 152 million of them had been created. Let me tell you about one of them. And this is a blog that was created using a free weblog site called WordPress in 2014. That is at the time when there were large-scale protests related to privatization and corruption and other issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the purpose of this blog was to gather information that was produced by people directly involved in the protest, where necessary to translate it into English, and to make it available to the public and especially to media. One of the motivations for forming it was dissatisfaction with the way that protests were covered on media. That is, since it was something that was happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the issue was framed in terms of ethnic conflict, and these were questions and activities that had nothing to do with ethnic difference or ethnic conflict. So the idea was to give access to what the people who are directly involved in the activity were saying themselves, so as to improve the quality of media. How do I know all of this? It's because this blog was created by me, sitting right here. Took me about 2 minutes to go to wordpress.com and to register a new blog under the title Bosnia and Herzegovina Protest Files. The amount of money that was spent in creating and maintaining this site was nothing. Nobody spent a penny, nobody received a penny. The people who were finding and selecting and translating materials for the site were myself and a group of people who I had mostly recruited on Twitter by sending a message saying, does anybody want to provide alternative information? So they were all volunteers. Most of them were research students at different universities around the world. They created and translated materials, put it up, made it available to the public. During the height of the protests, the months of March and April especially, when activity was highest, this site was getting something like 10,000 visitors a day. Conspiracy theories developed around it. They said, who is financing this site? What interest is it really serving? Not knowing that it was a bunch of people volunteering their time because they were dissatisfied with the information that was available. So this is a road to this kind of democratic participation that was available to people who had some knowledge of technology and interest in the area, and some knowledges of language, an example of citizen media. Now, this is something that's become more prominent later on. We all know about the role of Facebook and Twitter in protests in places as like Egypt and Ukraine and Turkey and Belarus and so on. One of the things that we're able to see developing in this is visible struggles for power between state-controlled media and citizen media. That is to say, to the extent that there were some optimistic expectations tied to the democratic potential of new media. Some of these have been realized, but some other things have happened too. What are some other things that have happened with new media? The first is that over time, new media have come to look a lot more like old media. That is, the decentralized control that made it look so appealing to people and to theorists like Habermas seems to have been followed by re-centralization. A lot of the production of content has got into the hands of companies, including old monopolies like the big media companies and some new monopolies that have emerged out of the development of the new media system, companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter and so on. Second, new media have proved to be very effective at spreading information, but they are also very good at spreading a lot of misinformation, untrue material, distraction, conspiracy theory, and so on. A third thing we could notice is that we tend to assume that any movement that is citizen-based is going to be democratic both in character and in intention. That's not what we see in terms of activism in new media. Not all of the movements that have derived from new media have been democratic in orientation. It's also become a site for the organization and the spread of a number of racist, authoritarian, and similar movements. At the same time, we've seen that the power that citizens seem to have as participants in new media is reciprocated by powers of people with control over new media, which also are used for various types of surveillance, for data harvesting, and for manipulation. And we have seen cases in which new media, especially social media, are are used for targeted harassment and a number of ways of silencing participation in the public sphere. So what could we say generally? Maybe we could say this, that neither the hopes nor the fears that accompanied the emergence of electronic network media have been fully realized. And that makes what happened with them broadly similar to what's happened with the introduction of older types of media. There is some level of indeterminacy that is inherent in the process of the operation of media, and quite a lot of what happens depends on the character of regulation and probably also draws upon the general difficulty, because of the power of society broadly, in changing social, cultural, and political orders that have been long established.